You need to sign this right now." My stepmother's voice cut through the rehearsal dinner like a knife. The champagne flutes on the table caught the candlelight, casting dancing shadows across the private dining room. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like an execution chamber. My younger brother's wedding weekend at the Ashford estate. That's what this was supposed to be. A celebration. But the document she slid across the white linen tablecloth wasn't a toast. It was a death warrant for everything my grandmother left me. I could smell the lie beneath the roses and expensive cologne. That metallic scent of desperation, masked as family duty. My mother sat to my left, dabbing her eyes with a silk napkin. My brother, Jason, was at the head of the table, in his rehearsal dinner suit, looking everywhere, except at me. His fiancée, Madison, had her hand on his shoulder, her engagement ring catching the light like a warning beacon. They had set this up perfectly. Madison's parents, the Vanderbilts of Charleston society, watched from the far end with cold curiosity. They thought they were witnessing a family matter. They had no idea they were watching a heist. The ultimatum was simple. Sign away my rights to grandmother's trust fund, the $2.8 million that was legally mine at 25. Or I would be uninvited from the wedding. Cast out, disowned, made invisible. My stepmother, Patricia, leaned forward. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped the paper. "Your grandmother would want you to help your brother start his future," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "He needs capital for the investment firm. You've had your chances, sweetheart. You dropped out of business school. You're barely making rent. What are you going to do with $2.8 million anyway? Waste it on another failed startup?" My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Please, honey, do this for the family. Jason deserves this opportunity. You can always make money later." Jason finally looked at me. There was no apology in his eyes, just entitlement, just the cold certainty that I would break, that I always broke. Madison squeezed his shoulder and gave me a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We'll make sure you're taken care of," she said sweetly. "You'll always be family." I picked up the pen. Patricia's shoulders relaxed. My mother let out a small sob of relief. Jason actually smiled. They thought I was surrendering. They thought I was the same girl who gave them everything and asked for nothing. The girl who paid for Jason's fraternity dues with her scholarship money. The girl who worked 3 jobs while he partied through college on grandmother's early distributions. They thought I was still her. I wasn't. I had just been waiting for this exact moment for 3 years. I set the pen down without signing. "No," I said quietly. The word hung in the air like smoke. Patricia's face went from shock to rage in seconds. "Excuse me?" My mother gasped. "Sweetheart, you don't understand. Jason needs this. The wedding is tomorrow. The Vanderbilts are here. You can't embarrass us like this." "I'm not embarrassing you," I said, reaching into my clutch. "I'm educating you." I pulled out a tablet and placed it in the center of the table. One tap, and the screen illuminated. "That document you want me to sign? It's fraud. You're asking me to transfer my inheritance into a shell company that Jason doesn't actually control. Patricia does. The investment firm doesn't exist. The business plan you showed me last month? Plagiarized from a 2019 Harvard case study." I swiped to the next screen. "But here's what does exist. Nexus Technologies. Ever heard of it?" Jason's face went pale. "The app company? The unicorn startup that just got valued at $4.2 billion last month," I corrected. "The one TechCrunch called the fastest growing B2B platform in North America. The one that's revolutionizing supply chain logistics for Fortune 500 companies." I turned the tablet to show them the Forbes article. There was my face. Professional headshot. CEO founder. Age 28. "I didn't drop out of business school because I was failing," I continued, my voice steady. "I left because I had $3 million in venture capital funding and a product that was already generating revenue. While you were telling your country club friends I was a disappointment living in a studio apartment, I was building a company. And that studio apartment? I own the building. All 48 units. It's my personal real estate portfolio testing ground for our platform." The silence was absolute. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. My mother had gone completely white. Madison's hand slipped from Jason's shoulder. Before anyone could speak, I swiped again. "Now let me show you what I know about all of you." I turned to Patricia. 2019. The charity gala you chaired for Children's Hospital. You raised $400,000, but only $150,000 made it to the hospital. The rest went into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I know because I bought the digital forensics firm that audits charitable organizations last year. We found everything. Patricia stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "You can't prove that. I can." And I did. I already filed the report with the IRS. They're very interested. I turned to my mother. "And Mom, remember when you said you needed $50,000 for emergency surgery? The thyroid condition you never wanted to talk about?" Her hand went to her throat. "I gave you everything I had saved from my first job. Every penny. You said it was life or death. I pulled up a photo on the tablet. My mother and Patricia at a spa resort in Turks and Caicos. Dated exactly 1 week after she took my money. There was no surgery. There was a vacation. And you split the money with Patricia. $25,000 each, for a month of luxury, while I ate ramen and worked 16-hour days. My mother started crying. Real tears this time. But not from remorse. From fear. Jason found his voice. This is insane. You're trying to ruin my wedding because you're jealous. Madison's family is here. Her father is a federal judge. You think you can just make accusations and destroy everything? I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Madison's father, Judge Vanderbilt, is indeed a federal judge. Which is why I'm very careful about my accusations. Every single thing I've said is documented, verified, and legally sound. In fact, I had my legal team send him a courtesy briefing yesterday. He's aware of the situation. Madison's face crumpled. You what? I told him that his future son-in-law is currently under investigation for securities fraud. You see, Jason, that investment firm you keep talking about? You actually did start it, last year, with money you embezzled from grandmother's estate while you had power of attorney during her final illness. You created phantom invoices for her medical care and pocketed $340,000. I have the receipts. I have the bank transfers. I have everything. Jason stood up, his face purple. You're lying. Grandmother left me in charge because she trusted me. She left you in charge because you manipulated her while she had dementia. And I have the medical records that show she wasn't competent to make financial decisions during that period, which means every transfer you made was illegal. I stood up, gathering my things. The wedding tomorrow? It's not happening. At least not at this venue. Patricia laughed. A harsh, desperate sound. The Ashford estate? We have a contract. We paid a deposit. You can't just cancel our wedding. I don't need to cancel it, I said. I own it. Nexus Technologies acquired Ashford Hospitality Group 6 months ago. This estate, along with 42 other luxury venues, are part of our corporate portfolio. We're testing our events management platform. And as CEO, I just decided this property needs immediate renovations starting tomorrow morning. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Madison started screaming. Actually screaming. Her mother rushed over to comfort her. Judge Vanderbilt stood up, his face grave. He looked at Jason. Is any of this true? Before Jason could answer, the dining room doors opened. 2 men in dark suits walked in. Miss Reeves? The first one said. Yes? I'm Special Agent Morrison, FBI. We have some questions about the allegations you filed regarding wire fraud and elderly financial abuse. My mother fainted. Patricia tried to run, but Agent Morrison's partner blocked the door. Jason just stood there, frozen. Madison was still screaming. Judge Vanderbilt looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. I gathered my coat. I'll be outside giving my statement. Take your time. As I walked toward the door, Patricia grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. You can't do this. I'm your family. Your mother and I raised you. I looked down at her hand, then at her face. For years, she had made me feel small, insignificant, a burden. But standing there, with federal agents in the room, and my entire empire backing me, I felt nothing but cold clarity. You didn't raise me, I said quietly. You used me. There's a difference, and tonight, the bill came due. I pulled my arm away and walked out into the cool evening air. Behind me, I could hear Madison sobbing, agents reading rights, my mother begging. I didn't look back. I kept walking until I reached the garden where my legal team was waiting with the documentation I'd need. They'd been on standby for 3 hours, waiting for my signal. This wasn't a reaction. This was a plan I'd been building since the day I found the spa resort photos, since the day I realized my family didn't love me. They loved what they could take from me. But I want you to know what happened that made me this way. What turned me from the girl who gave everything into the woman who took it all back. Let me take you back 6 years. I was 22. I had just finished my sophomore year at Northwestern. I was studying business and computer science, working toward a double major. My grades were perfect. I had a partial scholarship, but it didn't cover everything. I worked as a research assistant, a weekend barista, and did freelance coding to make up the difference. One night, my mother called. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she needed money for medical treatment, a thyroid condition. The surgery would cost $50,000 and insurance wouldn't cover it. She said she was in pain. She said she might die without it. She begged me not to tell Patricia or Jason because she didn't want to burden them with worry. I had $52,000 in my account. It was everything I'd saved for my senior year, tuition and living expenses. Every late night shift. Every weekend I worked while my classmates partied. Every sacrifice I'd made. But she was my mother, and she said she was dying. I transferred the money the next day. All of it. I kept $2,000 for immediate expenses and gave her the rest. She cried and called me her angel. She said she'd pay me back as soon as she recovered. She said I was the only person in the world she could trust. 2 weeks later, I came home for Jason's 21st birthday party. I walked into our house and saw my mother and Patricia laughing in the kitchen, looking at photos on a phone. They were photos from Turks and Caicos, luxury resort, spa treatments, private beach dinners. I saw the receipts on the counter. The dates matched exactly. 2 weeks after I'd given her the money, I confronted her. I asked her about the surgery. She didn't even have the decency to lie. She looked at me with cold eyes and said, "Patricia and I needed a break. The stress of dealing with your grandmother's decline was too much. We deserved a vacation. You're young. You can always make more money. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." I asked about my tuition. She shrugged. "Take out loans like everyone else. Stop being so dramatic." That night, something inside me died. The part that believed in family. The part that thought love meant something. I went back to school with $2,000 and a mountain of debt. I had to drop to part-time enrollment. I maxed out credit cards for books and rent. I ate once a day. I worked every hour I wasn't in class. But I also started coding in earnest. Every free moment, I was building. I was creating. I was turning my rage into something productive. I built a prototype for a supply chain management platform. I pitched it to every investor who would listen. Most laughed at me. A 22-year-old dropout with no connections and no safety net. But one person saw something. Margaret Chen, a venture capitalist who'd built her own empire from nothing. She gave me $3 million and 6 months to prove myself. I proved it in 3. By the time I was 24, we had 50 corporate clients and $20 million in revenue. By 26, we'd gone international. By 28, we were valued at $4.2 billion. And through it all, I never told my family. Let them think I was struggling. Let them think I was barely surviving in that studio apartment. I wanted to see what they'd do when they thought I had nothing left to take. Turns out, they'd try to take the one thing grandmother protected. My inheritance. The trust fund she set up specifically so they couldn't touch it. So I set the trap. I played weak. I played poor. I showed up to family dinners in old clothes. I let them pay for meals and made a show of being grateful. I watched them pity me, mock me, use me as a cautionary tale, and I documented everything. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation. I hired forensic accountants. I bought the companies that held their secrets. I positioned my pieces on the board and I waited. I waited for them to make the killing blow. And tonight, at this rehearsal dinner, they did. Now let me tell you what happened after I walked out of that dining room. The FBI investigation moved fast. Within 48 hours, they had enough evidence to file formal charges. Patricia was arrested for charity fraud and money laundering. The total amount she'd stolen from various organizations over a decade? $2.3 million. She'd been running the scam for years, using her society connections and my mother's help. My mother was charged as an accessory. She tried to claim she didn't know, but the spa receipts and bank transfers told a different story. She'd been splitting the money 50-50. Jason's case was more complex. The elderly financial abuse charges carried serious weight. Stealing from grandmother during her dementia? That's a federal crime, with a mandatory minimum sentence. But it got worse for him. The securities fraud went deeper than I initially knew. He'd been running a Ponzi scheme, promising investors returns from the non-existent investment firm. He'd taken $1.2 million from people, including some of Madison's family friends. When Judge Vanderbilt found out his future son-in-law had defrauded his colleagues, the wedding was off within hours. Madison's family released a statement through their lawyers. The Vanderbilt family had no knowledge of Mr. Reeves's criminal activities and extends deepest apologies to all affected parties. The wedding has been canceled indefinitely. Madison herself tried to contact me 3 times. She wanted to explain that she had no idea, that she loved Jason but couldn't stand by him through this, that she hoped we could still be friends. I blocked her number. She wasn't a victim. She knew exactly who Jason was. She just didn't know I was stronger. The legal proceedings took months. Patricia tried to flee the country, but was stopped at the airport. My mother attempted suicide in a dramatic cry for sympathy, but the psychiatric hold evaluation determined it was performative. Jason hired the best lawyer money could buy, which wasn't saying much since all his assets were frozen. In the end, the sentences were harsh. Patricia got 8 years in federal prison. My mother got 5 as an accessory. Jason got 12 for the combined charges of elderly abuse, securities fraud, and wire fraud. The judge showed no mercy. During sentencing, he said, "You preyed on the vulnerable, betrayed family trust, and showed zero remorse. These sentences reflect the gravity of your crimes." But here's what happened that nobody expected. 3 days after the arrests, I received a call from Judge Vanderbilt. He asked to meet me for coffee. I almost declined, but something in his voice made me curious. We met at a small cafe in Charleston, away from society eyes. He looked tired, older than his 60 years. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "Madison told me you were trouble, that you were jealous of your brother's success, That you were making up lies to sabotage the wedding. I believed her because I wanted to believe that my daughter had found a good man. I didn't do my due diligence. I'm a federal judge and I failed to see the criminal in front of me. I stirred my coffee. Your daughter is 26 years old. She's responsible for her own choices. She is, he agreed. But I raised her in a world where appearance mattered more than substance, where connections mattered more than character. I created the environment that made her think Jason was a catch, that his last name and his confidence were enough. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. This is a letter of apology to every person Jason defrauded. I'm personally ensuring they're repaid in full. It's not my legal obligation, but it's my moral one. My daughter's choices led them to trust him. I opened the envelope. The letter was handwritten, personal, devastating in its honesty. Why are you showing me this? Because you're the only person in this entire disaster who had integrity. You could have exposed them quietly. You could have just protected yourself. Instead, you built a case that ensured justice for everyone they hurt. My colleagues who were defrauded. The charities Patricia stole from. Your grandmother's memory. You didn't do this for revenge. You did it for accountability. He stood to leave, then paused. My daughter asked me to convince you to drop the charges. To forgive and move on. I told her no. Some things can't be forgiven. Some people need to face consequences. Thank you for being strong enough to enforce that. After he left, I sat in that cafe for an hour, reading his letter over and over. It was the first time anyone in that family had acknowledged what I'd done was right. Not vengeful, not cruel. Right. 6 months later, I received another unexpected contact. My mother's lawyer called requesting a meeting. She wanted to see me, wanted to talk. I almost said no, but my therapist suggested it might bring closure, so I agreed to a supervised visit at the detention center. My mother looked smaller, grayer. The orange jumpsuit was unflattering, but it was her eyes that shocked me. They were empty. She sat across from me, separated by plexiglass, and picked up the phone. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I deserve that." She looked down at her hands. "I've had a lot of time to think. About what I did. About who I became. The therapist here says I have narcissistic personality disorder. That I used you as a resource, instead of seeing you as a person." "That's accurate," I said flatly. "I'm not here to make excuses. I'm not going to beg for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "But I need you to know something. Your grandmother knew. Before the dementia got bad, she knew what we were, what I was. She changed her will to protect you. She left you the trust fund because she knew I'd try to take it. She told me once, when I complained about you getting more than Jason, that girl is going to be something extraordinary, and I won't let you dim her light." My throat tightened. I didn't know that. She made me promise not to tell you. She said you needed to find your own strength without relying on her validation. She said the world would try to break you and you needed to be unbreakable. My mother wiped her eyes. She was right. You are unbreakable. And I spent your whole life trying to break you anyway. The visit lasted 30 minutes. We didn't hug. We didn't reconcile. But something shifted. Not forgiveness. Understanding, maybe. Or just the acknowledgement that she'd lost and I'd won. That the natural order had been restored. I never visited her again. But every Christmas, I had my assistant send her a card. Nothing personal. Just thinking of you during the holidays. A reminder that I was out here, living, thriving, while she counted down her sentence. Some people called it cruel. I called it justice. Patricia never contacted me. She maintained her innocence to the end, claiming she was framed. That I had fabricated evidence. Nobody believed her. The forensic accounting was too thorough. Jason wrote me letters from prison, dozens of them, begging for help, for money for his commissary account, for legal fees for an appeal, for anything. I had my lawyer send one response: no contact. Further correspondence will be treated as harassment. As for the wedding venue, the Ashford estate went on to become one of our most successful properties. We renovated it completely, turned it into a tech-forward luxury destination. It books out 2 years in advance now. Sometimes I walk through it during corporate events and think about that rehearsal dinner, about how close they came to winning, about how perfectly I'd positioned every piece. The company grew. Nexus Technologies expanded into healthcare logistics, then manufacturing, then government contracts. The valuation hit $7 billion by the time I turned 30. Forbes put me on their 30 under 30 cover. They asked me about my family. I said, I built this company on my own. Some of us don't have the luxury of family support. We just have the drive to prove everyone wrong. The article went viral. I received thousands of messages from people who'd been underestimated, used, discarded by their families. People who thought they were alone. I started a foundation. The Grandmother's Trust Fund. We provide capital to entrepreneurs from abusive family situations. No strings, no equity required. just support for people who need someone to believe in them. Last year, we funded 200 startups. 15 have already gone public. The work matters more than the money, though the money is nice too. I'm 32 now. I never married. I date occasionally. But trust is hard when you've learned that the people who are supposed to love you will sell you out for a vacation. My therapist says I'm working on it, that healing isn't linear, that I'm allowed to protect myself. I have friends now, real ones, people who knew me when I was building Nexus in that studio apartment, who helped me code through the night and celebrated every small victory. They're my family now. The chosen kind. Last month, I got a call from Jason's lawyer. He's up for parole review. They wanted to know if I'd submit a statement supporting early release. I laughed. Actually laughed. Tell him I said no. Tell him I said he should serve every single day of his sentence. Tell him that's what grandmother would have wanted. The lawyer paused. That seems harsh. Harsh was stealing from a dying woman. Harsh was embezzling from people who trusted you. Harsh was trying to frame your sister to cover your crimes. I'm not being harsh. I'm being just, sometimes, late at night. I wonder what would have happened if I'd signed that paper. If I'd given them the trust fund and walked away. Would they have been satisfied? Or would they have just kept taking until there was nothing left? I think I know the answer. People like that don't stop. They consume. They destroy. And if you let them, they'll convince you it's your fault for not having more to give. But I didn't sign. I didn't break. I built an empire on the foundation of every time they told me I wasn't good enough. Every time they took from me and called it love. Every time they tried to make me small so they could feel big. I took all that pain and I forged it into something they could never touch. Something they could never take. Myself. People ask me if I regret it. If I wish I still had a relationship with my family. If the money and success are worth the loneliness. I tell them I'm not lonely. I'm free. There's a difference. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Freedom is realizing that some connections are chains, and cutting them loose is the bravest thing you can do. That night at the rehearsal dinner, when I walked out of the Ashford estate with FBI agents documenting evidence behind me, I didn't lose a family. I escaped one. And for the first time in my life, I could breathe without the weight of their expectations crushing my chest. I could dream without them telling me those dreams were worthless. I could build without them stealing the tools from my hands. So no, I don't regret it. Not for a single second. Because the alternative was spending the rest of my life being slowly drained by people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. And I'd rather be alone and whole than surrounded and empty. My grandmother taught me that. Even if she had to do it from beyond the grave. She knew they'd come for me eventually. She knew I'd have to be strong enough to stand alone, and she made sure I had the means to do it. The trust fund was never about the money. It was about giving me a choice. Sign and submit. Or fight and be free. I chose freedom. And I'd choose it again every single time.